Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Unblock Your BS podcast. Today, I am bringing on one of my clients and students inside of the Healthy Mentality program that we just wrapped up a couple weeks ago. My good friend Mark. He's a husband, a father, and again, one of the founding members inside of the Healthy Mentality group program just for men. Mark came into this program struggling with confidence, people pleasing, and emotional reactivity, and walked away with more self awareness, more emotional regulation tools, my fave, and a completely different sense of how he wants to show up in life and in relationships. So, we talk about how old survival patterns like fight or flight, fawn or freeze, or some of the other ones show up in everyday moments. Why conflict in relationships is often more rooted in childhood and what it actually feels like for a man to do this inner work. Mark shares openly and honestly about his hesitations, what shifted for him, and why he believes more men need this type of support. So, if you're a man who's been following along, or you know one that could use this type of program or this type of content, and you're wondering if this is for you, if you're stuck in your head, if you're second guessing yourself, if you're stuck in emotional cycles with your partner, then maybe this would be a good episode for the both of you to listen in on. So, enrollment for the next round of the Healthy Mentality program is officially open, and we kick off that program starting May 18th. You can head on over to unblockyourbs.com/men-tality. I'll link that up in the show notes to learn more, and then we can jump on a call to see if it's the right fit for you. But let's get into today's episode with my client, Mark. Hey, Mark, welcome to the podcast. And thank you so much for coming on today to kind of share about your experience in the Healthy Mentality program.
Thanks for having me. It was nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. All right. So let's kind of talk about where you were at, gosh, almost 2 months ago now. And what had you starting to look for support, get some coaching, and then I kind of introduced the program after we had had an initial session.
Yeah, I struggle with insecurities within myself of always trying to please others and worried about what other people think about me. So it was, when we first met, it was good. The breath session helped a lot, and then I just realized, and when you started to offer that course, I just wanted to empower myself more, I guess, so I can make clearer decisions.
Yeah. So, in what ways were you operating in life before the program where you were self-abandoning or you were not getting the connection that you were seeking from your partner?
I'm definitely a fight or flight person. So I struggle with that all the time. And always, I just like lack self confidence, I guess, more than anything. Um, and that's what I was trying to focus on. And it's, still work in progress, but I'm definitely making steps in the right direction. And the class was, the group class was really good too, because it empowers you to focus on yourself and not just about an outcome, but it allows you to try to empower yourself to make decisions that are right for you personally.
Yeah. So let's kind of dive into that once you join the program, because I know you're a little bit hesitant and then kind of jumped into it. And so, what was out of the entirety of the program, what kind of stands out to you as shifts or ahas that where things started to click a little bit more for you?
Um, I don't know. The group setting help part was, seeing there was five of us in the class, and we're all kind of struggling with many of the same things and different pieces of it. Different twists to the same concept. Um, and then, you making us focus on accountability to ourselves,
Yeah.
which was a big help. Um, so that was interesting. Even during while I was traveling, I had to be on vacation during part of it, and you held us accountable or held me accountable for that part.
Mhm.
So that was a bonus, not
Oh,
maybe at the
okay.
time, but it was after the fact.
In what ways did it hold you accountable, Mark? Do tell.
So that was good. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think it just, I'm still trying to work on that. It's a work in progress. You don't take years of anxiety and those types of things in the fight or flight, um, and just reverse it right away. It takes time and practice and constantly reinsuring yourself, and still even driving down the road, sometimes I have to do focus on breathing a little bit just to get away, to clear the brain a little.
Yeah. And I think if I'm understanding kind of what you're getting at is it's first and foremost the intentionality behind it of what is it who is it I'm trying to be? How do I want to show up in my life? Where have I not been showing up in ways that I want to? And eliminating any sort of blocks that are holding you back from being the man that you want to be, as well as having tools and skills to be able to handle when your nervous system gets dysregulated, goes into fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. Because I know oftentimes, and we do cover this in the program, what the default coping skills are for a lot of, we'll say men in particular, but everybody has default coping skills that are actually unhealthy and lead to more disconnect both with yourself and with others. But also in this program, we talk about why those things are the default. Either we're trying to numb, we're trying to distract, we're trying to feel desired, wanted, but we kind of default to things that disrupt connection with others. Whereas inside this program, we kind of go, here's what's actually happening in your world and the unmet needs underneath it. Now, how can we actually get those unmet needs met rather than have these symptoms that, we're anxious, we're stressed, we're trying to repress, we're trying to numb it, we're trying to distract it and actually solve for the problem at hand rather than the symptoms of the problem. Does that sound about
Yeah,
right?
I definitely agree with that. That it's trying to solve the bigger piece of the puzzle instead of the little pieces.
Yeah.
Being the fight or flight part of it all the time for me, as much as I'm outgoing in many ways, in some aspects I'm like really shy, I guess, the lack of self confidence shows through in many ways.
Yeah. So one of the weeks we talk about becoming the man that you desire to be, right? We give some examples of what I call healthy masculinity, but really it's not me telling you guys how to be a man. It's you guys being intentional about the man you want to become. What were some of the shifts from that week that you're working on stepping into to be the partner and the man that you desire to be moving forward?
Yeah, that's the key to the whole thing, right? Is try to figure that part out. And, I want to be the best partner.
Mhm.
Um, in same token, I want to be happy internally,
Yeah.
and finding where that is I'm still working on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I've seen some changes that I outside people may not have see it, but I feel internally different that I'm working on. It's I see it with my kids. How I interact with them a little bit. You know what I mean? Um,
So how is that different for you?
things.
Kind of give me some specifics.
I try to be more patient
Okay.
um, regarding that part. Because I struggle with going either from super happy to agitated. And so I've been learning, with the breath work and all that, help slow that piece of it down, or when the transition's coming to slow it down,
Yeah.
to be a little bit more methodical on how I word things.
Yeah.
And you had to bring it to my attention sometime, a couple times, is that stop letting other people's choices affect me personally.
Yeah.
And that kind of hit home when you talked about that way. Um, So that's just who I am. Is that stuff triggers me sometimes, you know what I mean? And just trying to let it roll with the punches and then not let it bother me.
Well, talk to me about how me saying that now started to shift how you view conflict or interactions, or how you take power back over your nervous system and your responses as opposed to being so reactive.
Yeah, I think personally it's little things that people would do would just affect me personally, and it really didn't need to affect me because it didn't really affect me. It was just a mindset it was affecting me because I'm like, well, why are they doing it that way? Or why don't you just move out of the doorway and
That's a
let
good
it
point.
let people walk through, you know what I mean, to me. And it's like it winds me up, but in reality, it doesn't affect me.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Let's give context to the listeners about that. Are you okay sharing with that particular instance where you got worked up because your wife was like standing in the doorway between people walking in and out and you got worked
Yep.
up about it? Okay, tell how you responded in that moment versus how now looking back at it, you have a different perspective on that situation.
So how I reacted in the moment was more, why don't you just move out of the doorway so people can walk in and out? We were in a restaurant, right? So we were kind of semi block on the doorway in a tight area. Um, I'm the one that would rather just go sit in the corner and wait till my name to be called. um, and ironically, she is too. But in that moment, she was just like standing there, and it kind of like rattled my cage a little bit. And when you and I talked about it, you're like, why are you letting it bother you? You know what I mean? And it's not my decision. It doesn't affect me personally. And when I stopped and thought about it, it was actually a very valid point that I can't let that stuff bother me. So now I just don't really say anything. I just deep breath, try to focus on something else.
Yeah.
And so I don't get, tangled up in it.
So why did it bother you? Have you unpacked why that started to elevate you?
I don't know. I really don't know. And I've actually tried to think about that. And it's just,
Do you mind if we explore it a little bit? Because I have some possible thoughts.
all right, I'll try.
Okay, so she was standing in the doorway, people are walking in and out, and she kinda keeps getting jostled or whatever, and you're just like, "Why are you just standing there?" kind of a thing, right? That was
Yeah.
essentially what's happening. So, were you more concerned about her being an inconvenience to others, or her getting hurt, or what when you were kind of looking at the scenario that was happening, what was it that you were trying to solve for?
More of the inconvenience to others. So
Yeah,
that
that
makes,
people pleasing, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. In reality, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So in your mind, if you can go back to that place of like you're worried about other people getting upset with her standing in the doorway, what was really underneath that? Were you worried there was going to be conflict and then you would have to step in to like protect her, that she was going to get something was going to be said about her, that she was going to get hurt?
No, I don't think it was that at all. It was just more about, there was staff coming in and out, patrons coming in through and out. Um, why slow that piece down for others? You know what I mean? We were just legitimately waiting to be seated. So it wasn't a big deal where we were standing more than anything. And so it's like hindsight 2020, it shouldn't matter.
Well, and that's what I want you to have that kind of context of what was really like what was the worst case scenario that I was picturing happening, whether somebody was going to say something, do something because they were being inconvenienced by her and you were worried about that, or that she would get hurt, or people would judge you for
I
her
think
for
it's
standing
more about the judgment.
the judgment.
I
Okay,
don't think
good.
we were at a pretty nice restaurant, so it's not like it would be a scene of any sort. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If we weren't blocking the doorway totally, people were still going by. It just
They
makes a
had to go a
little,
little bit around. They were a little
yeah,
inconvenienced.
exactly.
And the judgment piece. Interesting.
So that I just had to learn to. She's an adult, at this age, we're all adults, and if that's what somebody wants to do it, because then honestly, if it was somebody that I didn't know, it probably wouldn't have really bothered me.
Yeah. Or you would have judged them.
Yeah, that's possible.
Right. So when I see that, because that's usually when we're worried about other people judging us, is because we actually judge others. It's a mirror for us. So I'll give a different example of another client that I'm working with where we were working on her getting building a tolerance for loneliness to go out and have dinner by herself. And
Mhm.
she was like, no way, I would never do that. And I said, why? And she's like, I'm afraid of people judging. I'm like, when you see somebody eating alone, do you judge them? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, "Okay, well, then you're actually worried about that you would think what, you think of other people when they're alone." I said, and because her and I have rapport, I said, "If I was eating at a restaurant alone, knowing what you know about me, would you have those same judgments?" And she's like, "No, I would think it was a really empowered, like, good for you kind of a thing." I'm like, "Interesting that it
Yeah.
depends on the person." So in that scenario, do you think that if you did see that from somebody else that wasn't in your relationship, that you would almost judge them of like, why are they standing there like they're in their own little world? How could they not see how they're affecting other people? Would that be the thoughts that might
Yeah, I catch myself doing that.
yeah. So it's really more you were worried about it's a reflection of you of the judgment you have towards others. When we
Mhm.
fear judgment from other people, it's usually because we are our own worst critic in our head and we're actually very harsh and critical and judgmental in our own head. So that's a mirror of the work that you can be doing of how do I speak to myself where that is my immediate thought is going to I'm worried about other people judging because I judge so much. So other people must do it too.
Yeah.
Right, and now you're starting to kinda see the
Yeah,
other side. Maybe other people don't judge, they don't even think about it, doesn't even cross their mind.
yeah, even if you don't say it, you're probably thinking it, right? So it's a mindset thing.
Right, because that's usually where we're very self-centered creatures because we don't know what it's like in other people's heads. We can talk about it, but we don't really know what other people think, feel, act, whatever. But we all are very much immersed in our own little world. So we have this default assumption that everybody else thinks about the same things we do. But very rarely are other people thinking about you as much because we're thinking about ourselves as much as you're thinking about yourself. And so
Right.
it is an interesting kind of poking a hole in that judgment piece that we're worried somebody will judge us for something. So I deal with that on the podcast all the time because I share very openly about things of like, oh, how's that going to come across? Or, oh, what's that going to do? And also I recognize it's not about me. The listeners listening in, it's not like, oh, I want to know Tara and I want to judge Tara. They're listening in because they're trying to get value from the conversations that we have on these podcasts. And so when
Mhm.
you start to shift that of making it less about you and more um less critical, I guess, of others, you can have that nervous system response start to calm down because the fear kind of goes away. So, like you experience, it's like, oh, yeah, she's standing in the doorway. Well, if it's inconvenient to her, she can problem solve for that. I can offer for her to come sit over here and she can choose whether she wants to or not. But I'm responsible for me. So, me getting worked up over another person's decision, I need to check in what it is that I'm actually getting worked up for, which for you in that moment was judgment. And that's kind of where we can look at our triggers as lessons and opportunities for us to work on our own self.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I liked about the whole your podcast, and that's what kind of drew me into the class itself is that you really focus on people empowering themselves.
Mm,
Um, yeah, your examples and your life stories help because you make it realize
so
that
relatable.
we're relatable, right? We're all human. So that obviously helps, right? And some of the things you mentioned over different podcasts is I see in myself, right? So that's relatable there as well. So all in all, the class was we talked about it. I wish it was a little longer.
Yeah, well, we're fixing that next round. I got you. I got you.
um, but yeah, it was definitely worth it, even though I was um, questioning doing it, I guess. And
Yeah.
I'm
So
glad
what
I
were you questioning? Be honest about that. Because I'm sure there are people that are listening that are having the same questions and same hesitation or skepticism. I know Stuart, who will be on the podcast, had a lot of skepticism uh, with it, which he shared with me. So kind of talk to me about what was the skepticism or the hesitation that you had. You're not going to hurt my feelings, by the way.
no, it had nothing to do with that. It was more about digging that deep into myself, I guess, is part of it. Um, the money,
Yeah.
it's when you look at it as a bigger picture, it's worth it. But in reality, in the short term, when you got to open up your wallet, you get a little, nervous about it, especially, a lot of people are living, on a tighter budget.
Yeah. And investing into yourself feels almost indulgent or
Mhm.
unnecessary. I totally get that.
It's not like, if you're going somewhere and you're spending that money and you're getting a dopamine hit, it feels different than when
Yeah.
you're digging into yourself and it's not always the dopamine hit to
You
dig
don't
into
get the
yourself.
instant gratification.
Yeah, you got to look
I've
at it
spent
over
this, now I feel
a picture.
better. Yeah. Yep. 100%. So, now that you have hindsight, what advice would you give that version of you that was hesitant, that's kind of like, oh, I don't know, maybe this isn't the right time for it? Now that you have the benefits and kind of have seen the growth and progression of yourself over the last few weeks.
Um, Other than I'm glad I did it, and I don't know what the nervousness was about. I guess it was definitely worth doing.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wish it was a little longer, um, but that's testament to what it was worth to people.
Yeah. Just still want to keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So that's and it was ironic that some of us peaked at different times.
Yeah. It's like every week
So
is a different guy.
that was ironic. You know what I mean? And but it's also shows in real life that you go through peaks and valleys of life, personally. So it's, when does it trigger you? When does something trigger you? When does something not trigger you? And how to
Yeah.
keep that regulated.
Well, talk to me about because I know some people hesitate with group programs where, especially when we're talking about stuff that's fairly vulnerable at times. Talk to me about how the group dynamic and even just being able to speak into other men's lives, because you absolutely did that as well, and be able to connect during the week too as things were coming up in real time. I mean, we had men actively going through divorces, men that were getting filed from divorce right early on. We had men that were going through struggles in relationships. Like it was kind of everybody had a little bit unique scenario, but it was all challenges in relationships. Talk to me about what that the group component, how you kind of got over that it wasn't like everybody's just pouring their hearts out every week, because that really wasn't it. It was much more, I don't know, I want to hear from the men's side, because from my side it was very different just being the facilitator, but from
I
your
don't
side.
mean we shared some of our situations, but it wasn't like in detail. So it wasn't like you're giving away your whole
Everything.
life story. The group chat was very helpful. Um, you know, do you say, if you just had something on your mind and you were very supportive in that, that you were chiming in and encouraging us to try this or think of it this way, or, so that was very, especially in the heat of the moment that
Yeah.
your brain's going haywire, you were there still virtually to, hey, try this, you know what I mean? So I found that very supporting role, which I didn't anticipate in being in a part of that class. So kudos to you. And then everybody was going through their own little challenges, some bigger than others, so to speak. But in reality, if it's a challenge, it's still a challenge to you mentally and emotionally and all those things that go with it.
Yeah.
Um, so that was pretty. I didn't find it awkward to open up at all.
Yeah.
I think we're all there to learn and better ourselves. And I think, at that point, nobody's there. I didn't get a sense of anybody.
With ego.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Listen, we're all there to try to better ourselves, right? And at the end of the day, we're all struggling in some way or form. So
Yeah.
it was that part, and it was ironic, not really ironic. It shows to the group of the people trying to learn and better themselves that they were some of our biggest cheerleaders during some questions. So that was, rewarding as well.
Yeah. Do you feel like in your day-to-day life in person that you have this kind of support system or these types of men that you can talk to in this kind of way?
Not always.
Yeah. I think that kind of helps creating that safe container is that you're probably not going to know anybody else in the group like in real life. And also we do have a call with me before I allow anybody into the program for those reasons of creating a culture of the group that is a safe space and that people
Mhm.
aren't going to be weird about it. And so I think Stuart said that well, he said, trusting the process and knowing that you vetted everybody that came into this program helped me to open up more. But yeah, having that, there's that similar commonality that you guys are all on a healing journey and you're all trying to be better. So it wasn't like this, I'm better than anybody else kind of ego coming
No,
into it.
not
It
by
was
any means. I didn't feel
we
that way.
all got problems.
Yeah, I didn't feel that way at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you for validating that because that's very much in all of my programs. Like mental and emotional safety is number one. And I will kick people out of a program so fast if I feel like, first of all, coming into my world, like I'm a tough coach. Like I don't let you get away with much. You know that.
Validate. Even
Yeah.
when you called me out on a podcast. In a
Totally. I
fun
called you
way.
out on social media, just not by name. But
In a
it's
fun way,
true.
though. I deserved it, so I'll give you that.
I'll just say what it was. And it wasn't even like that. You were saying that you were on vacation, so you hadn't had time to do the homework that we had for that week. And I said,
Correct.
I'm totally fine with you choosing to do a vacation over, whatever in this program, but don't use it as an excuse. Like,
Right.
I don't think that was on the list of, healthy masculinity of making excuses for why you can't do
No,
something you're committed to.
but it
But
was a good. I joke about it, but in reality, it was a good look in the mirror, right?
yeah,
Because if you're trying to focus on it, you got to focus on it. And you can't. You got to always keep that in, you know, vision.
yeah. It's the intentionality. Literally, that is it.
You got to make it a. You got to make it a priority.
Yeah, it's a choice. And that's like that's what I said in the group is like I would rather you choose, make it a choice rather than an excuse of I chose to be present on vacation. Cool. I love that.
Right.
Rather than do the homework. Totally fine with that. just using that excuse. When we use excuses, it puts us in that victim mindset, which is what we're actively trying to get everybody out of with self-awareness, is make your choices. Even if you don't like the outcome of the choices, once you know that these are the choices I've made, even in your relationships, no matter how they've unfolded, when you recognize all of the micro choices, even the choices you didn't make that led to an undesirable outcome, that's where you get your power back. That's a lot of what I think, if we're looking at the underlying theme of this type of program, is where are your choices? Who do you want to choose to be? Knowing that, yes, you are the way that you are, that of how you've unfolded based on the choices of the past, but that doesn't have to dictate the future. And so that pausing, like you talked about, taking that breath, just taking a quick pause before the reaction ramps up, of how do I want to show up in this moment? Do I want to choose to honor what I'm feeling? Do I want to react and maybe, create destruction or more problems? Or do I want to just pause and not respond and give myself time for my nervous system to come down? And I think that ultimately is kind of what we harp on and teach on and keep going back to throughout what we're talking about in the program.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, it takes a lot of reminding yourself,
Yeah.
and you got to be able to feel it coming more than anything. That now's the time to hold your breath for a second and just relax. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because then you can actually, that logical part of your brain kicks on once we get the emotion down. We need to get the emotion down first. And
Hmm.
and to give context to the program, we're also teaching what's happening in your partner so that there can be some context of what you're experiencing from them that isn't triggering you as much in your fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. Especially because you've been married for what, 30 some odd years? Like, you guys have a lot of buttons and things that, like, kind of walking on eggshells sometimes. And being able to get out of that cycle that you guys have been in, to start to have deeper connection and more honest conversations and more deeper conversations, can be really beneficial to seeing if there's a different outcome or a different level of intimacy that you guys can have. So now that you've kind of been through the program, and look, I'll bring you back in. You want to come into the next round? You come back in the next round. I'm happy to help you. You can be my alumni. Um, if there's somebody out there who's unsure of joining this type of program, or they resonate with your experience and they're considering it, what advice would you give them to make a decision one way or the other? And maybe even highlight why investing in yourself is something that is safe for them to do, or it's something that they should value, aside from, because they're probably taking care of everyone else, right? And they're last on the list. And to start to shift, when you pour into yourself, you actually have more to give to others. So talk to me about how you would advise somebody who's resonating with you but not sure if they want to join.
Think if they truly want to change who they are, so to speak, or what's resonating from them, because I think we all have it in us. It's
Yeah.
just how do you get it out of us, right? And how do you look at yourself in the mirror? Um, I guess if that's what you really want to work on and change, then there's only one way to do it, is you got to do it, right? But being with the support staff and with you and the fellow men in the group was very rewarding. That I mean, there's many a times I would hear somebody else talking, and I'm looking at thinking to myself, hey, that's me, or hey, I really don't have it that bad after all.
Yep. Yep.
um, but like I said, does it cost money? Yes, but if you look at it as a long-term investment, it's really a short term, because the things that it's been over, what, 3 weeks now,
Yeah.
right? And I'm still using the tools, so it's a longer term investment than just those 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it's because you're a coach trying to get the best out of people, and not trying to and I've tried therapy and all those things, and they all got their place, but I, for some reason, have resonated with this more than others.
Mm. Can you speak to that? What the difference was for you between
I
something
don't
like
know,
traditional
maybe
talk
just the way
therapy?
you present it. um I'm not sure. I don't. I just It just resonated with me better.
Beautiful.
Maybe my personality, maybe how I take in information. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And why trust a woman to run a men's program? I know there's people who have challenged me on this. Not people that would be a part of this program, but people who are like, oh, men teach, or women teaching men to be men, which is not really what we do. But what was it about, maybe the female perspective in leading this type of program that helped benefit you?
because you're working on not male slash female
Mhm.
ways of thinking. It doesn't, it just, is it a group of men? Yes.
Mhm.
But is it, are you trying, you're really just trying to get people to focus on their inner selves and give them inner strength
Yeah.
to follow their heart. And I don't think it really matters whether it's a male or female. To me, it's just, I don't look at things that way. You know what I mean? So me, it didn't bother me. Like I mentioned to you before, is that there's several people on social media that are doing very similar things. There's something the way you come across, that I resonated better with you.
Yeah.
And it's nothing against them. I just felt like more of a click to you. You know what I mean?
I'm just really super direct and you appreciate that.
Yes, that too. Um, but you're direct, but you put a like I don't know how to say it, but like a sensitive twist to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you've been through the hard times and everything that you shared with, about your personal self. But I think everybody goes through hard times. It's just how there's like some people are great at business owners and some aren't, right?
Yeah.
There's some people that are amazing teachers, but they're not. And then there's other people that are not. There's people leaders and then there's people followers.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's a male or female concept to me
Yeah.
personally. And I don't think anybody should really, because I think if you start to think that way, me personally, I would say if somebody's thinking that way, they kind of already got a closed mindset.
It's their ego speaking. Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that. And how I look at it is I have I mean, first it started personally. Like the whole reason I got into self awareness and understanding trauma was because of my ex husband and his
Mhm.
PTSD when we were married, and him going to therapy and me trying to learn how his brain operated and understanding the differences between the male experience and the female experience in relationships. And then also to add on to that, I have been studying men for years, both in like dating, how they handle dating, how they handle relationships, what are common struggles that men face so that I can be a great partner. And now more professionally, while 85% of my following is women, I would say 50% or more of my DMs are from men looking to understand their partner better. And so, how I've kind of looked at it over the past 6 months when this idea really started pulling on me to support men specifically was being the bridge between men and women. And it's not me placing any sort of, I would say, my personal agenda on it or my personal history, other than I just share the stories. It is getting each individual side to love themselves, to know how to advocate for their needs rather than we keep kind of getting stuck in these cycles where communication isn't there. However, I see that there's more of a need for men to be able to understand these things because I do believe that men should be leaders in the relationship and that can look a whole bunch of different ways. And so starting with men learning how to lead can actually help women out in not having to take on all of the burdens, all the mental and emotional labor, and that men seem to resonate with the content that I share, that there is something that I'm saying that they're like, oh, maybe that's the block. So it's less about like teaching men to be men. It's more, I've been on the side of really toxic men, really, really dysregulated. I mean, I was married to somebody who was special forces in the military. Like I've seen it all in all of the ways in which men unregulated start to react and how toxic and destructive that can be towards connection, period, not just with their partners but their families as well. And so that to me I feel like is there's a compassion and empathy piece there towards men that I think societally right now the messaging towards men is not safe for them. It's not empathetic. It's very accusatory, and I get rightfully so why some of that is out there because um there are unsafe men, but there are a lot of men who are trying to do the work to be safe spaces for women. And that to me just excites me and lights me up to get more men out there that are creating safe spaces, not just for themselves, but for everyone in the world, not just women. So,
Yeah, I think if you create a safe space for yourself, you become safer around others,
100%. Right.
because
Um,
you got to be safe within yourself. You know what I mean?
yeah.
You got to feel it's that it's not even a fine line, but like being confident, but not an ego,
Yeah. Yep.
right? You you got to be confident that if somebody feels like they don't like me, or I said something that caught them off, it was quirky and they didn't like it, well, I'm not, that's just my personality, I guess, right? And I didn't do anything drastically wrong. I just,
Well, you even being like, I loved that I said that. I was super funny in that. They took it the wrong way. Okay. Like that's on them.
right.
That's for them that they heard it that way. I had somebody who made a comment recently on TikTok and there was no blame on them, but I guess in one of the episodes, I always do this. Somebody says like, if it's God or source or universe, and they kind of start listing off trying to cover all the basis of people's belief systems. And I always jokingly throw in Thor because some of these get, a little wackadoo and that's fine. No judgment. And they said it sounded like I was insulting the guest that I said that to. And I said, no, actually I was trying to be inclusive, but if you heard it as an insult, like it wasn't, I can tell you that it wasn't meant to be, destructive, but
And
it's just
honestly, that would be me sometimes,
right.
taking it the wrong way.
Right. And it's how you're hearing it. So I'm just making assumptions here, but they are probably very protective of their own belief system. And for me, it's fascinating when people want to comment some sort of critical comment on a TikTok video. It's like you're spending time to leave a comment. This was not negative. They weren't trying to bash me. They were, I think, trying to inform me. But it's interesting that people would take time out of their day to leave a negative comment or make something to a stranger on the internet. They would take time out of their day to leave a nasty comment or a negative comment. I'm like, gosh, you can just scroll and move on with your day.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me because I always look at it from that lens, and that's kind of a whole different topic. But when you deal with people who criticize or you put yourself out there more, whether you're doing it publicly, on social media, or you're doing it in your personal life, people are going to experience you through their lens of their past experiences. And when we're going back to the judgment thing, when you are solid in yourself, knowing that you're a good person, that your intentions are always to help people or serve people or believe in kindness, then it gets very jarring and very disconnecting when somebody wants to say something negative towards you because you're just like, I don't believe that about myself. So just because you believe it doesn't make it true. It's their perception based on their experiences.
Right.
And that's where that judgment wound, if we fear judgment, it's usually because we're judging ourselves or we don't have a solid understanding in who we are. And that's kind of why this healing journey can be a beautiful journey for, I hate the term self-love because it sounds so cheesy, but when you're confident in who you are, it doesn't matter what other people think. It really doesn't. Because look, if you, let's say this comment affected me, let's just say this person, no, I'll say this on YouTube. I get really mean comments on YouTube. I don't know what it is about the YouTube algorithm. It puts me in front of really cranky men. Totally fine. Some days they really affect me. They're very harsh and I get snappy back with them. I have to like put my phone down or have my team take away my access for a day. Because I will, I started off my career writing blogs for a living. Tempt me with a good time and a fun comment. But I get reactive and I'm like, ooh, that's my work to do. Because this is a stranger. They don't know anything about me. They saw one video or one clip and they made a judgment and they took time to post about it. And here I am getting me worked up. Something about what they said, I must take as truth, that I must think that a part of it must be true. Otherwise it wouldn't affect me. So part of that is also the work to do around judgment is if you fear judgment, what specifically are the things, like for you, I think it was the inconveniencing other people. What is that rooted in? Where is the block there that still has a nervous system response? So that's more healing to do. And that's why I don't think we're ever fully healed. I think there's layers to it. I think we can get to new levels of healing, but to be fully healed would mean we would stop living and stop learning about ourselves.
Yep.
Work
in progress.
Give you something to think about. Awesome. Well, Mark, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your journey and your story.
Thank you for what you do most of all, to not only myself, but the people that you are helping. I guess that's all I can say about that. You know what I mean? And keep it up, because I'm still following you.
Yeah, Mark's the best hype man. He is always giving me words of affirmation, which is my love language. So I appreciate you for that. It really touches me. So thank you so much. And if you guys are interested in the next round of the Healthy Mentality program, we are opening it up soon. It's not just a program, it's a portal to unblocking the BS that's holding you back from becoming the man that you know you're meant to be. So head to unblockyourbs.com/men-tality. I'll link that up in the show notes to join the waitlist and be the first to know when the doors open. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you again.